Hello and welcome to Higher Thinking on Higher Ed. I am Charlene Carrington of Content Strong Communications, the fractional communications and marketing leader of choice for universities, colleges, and nonprofits. Today, I am excited to continue diving into the trends, the challenges encountered by leaders in higher education, and I am honored to welcome Brian Hodges to the hot seat today. Brian is Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management at Bradley University and has worked in higher education, mostly in admissions, for 20 years. During that time, he has volunteered many years with the Illinois Association for College Admission Counseling and has also served as president of the association. Thank you so much again for bringing your expertise to this conversation. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me, Charlotte. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Hopefully, I can provide some insight, and hopefully, we have a great conversation about higher ed.
I think we will. I think it will be a good one. So, I spoke a little bit about kind of what your background is, but the first question I typically like to ask is just to get a good sense of, the context with which you work in. Really, I think you mentioned to me earlier that you're still fairly new in your current role here at Bradley. And tell me a little bit about kind of what you've inherited, I guess. What are you building towards? How do you see enrollment management kind of shaping the university's growth right now?
Okay. Well, I have been a part of Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, for about 7 months now. And under my portfolio, I work directly with the undergraduate admissions. The director of undergrad admissions reports to me. Our director of graduate international and online admissions, and that
Right.
person reports directly to me. And the graduate instance in Bradley is actually new in for admissions. They used to have a graduate college that was dissolved, and then they came under admissions. And this is probably the first year we've done anything in the graduate instance as far as
Right.
real recruitments and processing and trying to start the recruitment and get a class in for our graduate college. So that's new. I also work with our campus visits. So, a director of the visit experience reports to me as well. Now, those are the three groups or three units that I'm in charge of as far as being in enrollment management. I also
Right.
work closely with financial aid office and our admissions technology director. So even though I don't supervise financial aid and admissions tech, we work closely hand in hand. So that's pretty much the full picture of enrollment management with Bradley University.
Okay, I get it. I totally get it. So, okay, so thinking about kind of where you are in the institution and how the institution kind of moves and moves forward, what are the kind of shifts you're seeing? So you mentioned, I think maybe in an earlier call that, even marketing and communications now make up a
Yes.
big portion of the enrollment battle. What shifts are you kind of seeing in how students are engaging and how, the kind of shifts in general are shaping your strategy day to day?
Well, yes, I'm glad you brought that up because my counterpart is the assistant vice president for marketing communication, and again, we work hand in hand as well. The communication aspect is really really huge. I know you mentioned that I've been doing this for about 20 years. When I first started, I was a admissions counselor, and phone calls was the only way we were truly communicating with students. And
Right.
email was a part of that, but it wasn't really taking over. Now
Right.
we have to email students. Now we have to hopefully if we see them on social media, we're doing something as far as communicating with social media. If we get their contact information, we're trying to text them. We're still trying to send calls out to them. We're trying to meet them where they are in as many possible ways as we can. Not necessarily
Right.
to bombard them with marketing and communication, but where they feel the most comfortable communicating with us. So we have
Right.
to go to as many different places as we possibly can. And if that's texting, that's what we're going to focus on. If it's phone calls, which most students now don't answer phone calls anymore. So, but if
Yep.
that's something, we'll keep calling them. If it's through email, even though they might not check their email, but they say know that information. We're trying to meet them where they are in as many different places as they are. And my unit within enrollment management works hand in hand with marketing communications. They help with the communication that's going out. We kind of supplement that with our admissions counselors and how they're reaching out students in their particular territories. And we're trying to find many ways to communicate with them. Now, that puts a lot of pressure not only on the marketing team, but also on the admissions team because we're trying to communicate in, say, 7 different ways to our
Right.
group of students. And then we might have different groups of students that might communicate better through phone or through text or through social media or through email. And we have to be in all those different places. So that's a lot of pressure and a lot of work that has to be handled not only by the counselors, but our marketing communications team.
That sounds like, I mean, maybe you're hitting on a bit of a challenge there, but that does sound like a challenge. Like the idea that you're both teams are almost stretched thin, right? Because you have to kind of be everywhere. And I think this is a trend we're seeing across the sector right now in general. It's this idea that,
Yes.
students are digital natives. They were born with a phone in their hand, in front of them. They were born kind of almost with a screen in front of them. And there are certain things that they block out and will completely not notice or not pick up on. And then there are other things that they are really interested in, they do really want to engage with. I wonder if, that knowledge or that, I guess, change in the way students behave when it comes to getting information and when it comes to making those almost enrollment decisions are impacting your strategy in any way.
Oh, very much so. One, we have to take stock on what we are capable, or what we have, what we can do, what we're capable of doing. And I
Right.
know for Bradley, we just don't have the staff to do all those different things. Not
Right.
only on the admission side, but also on the marketing communication side. So a lot of institutions, including ours, have to work with third party vendors, and
Right.
they have to help us with our communication plan. They kind of start from the ground level, as far as we call it, top of funnel. So we're reaching out to students freshman and sophomore year. We're working with those different vendors to kind of come up with a communication plan to hit them early. Maybe not necessarily just talking about Bradley University, especially for younger students,
Right.
but just helping them as far as the college search process. Now, it's definitely branded with the Bradley Shield and with the red, but we're just more, I would say, educating those students early on. So a lot of institutions will probably have to go that route. I worked at a previous institution where we had the resources, where we had a communications team and a staff that we can handle that in house and come up with a
Right.
communication plan. I would say most institutions don't fall into that category, so we have to work with, I would say vendors in general, and multiple
Right.
vendors, because we not every vendor has a different specialty, so you have to work with those different vendors. You have to meet students where they are, and that means you have to go to a lot of different places and hit them in different avenues. So I mean, I talk about working with a vendor with a communication plan, but we also have vendors that help us when it comes to financial aid optimization. We
Right.
also have vendors that help us when we come to students that are admitted. How do we make sure we're still at the front of mind for those students, because they were admitted to other institutions? How do we make
Right.
sure they're getting the information they need so they can choose our institution? So we work with a lot of different companies, and we are, I won't say spread thin, but we're trying to do a lot of different things to make sure we're communicating with students in the best way possible for them.
I'm gonna that you just raised a question in my mind, and I want to get to it, but I'm gonna wait for the next two questions because I think it will really align a little better. But the one thing that does come to mind immediately is, what's been working really well for you? What's been surprisingly successful over these first few months for you? And where are you and your team still kind of wrestling with persistent challenges?
But one thing that I would say definitely helped is, we are working with the vendor now to help us with our admitted student communication. A lot of us in our leadership role started probably, want to say, October. As you
Right.
know, that's well within the cycle already. Now we're
Yeah.
pretty much being reactive when it comes to trying to get students to apply, prospective students and inquiries to apply to our
Right.
campus. So we were able to sign up with the vendor to help us with our admitted student communication. And I will it actually showed us how we're communicating with students, when they're actually communicating with us, kind of
Right.
the things that are triggering, so we know this student is really interested in our campus, and the group of students that are interested in how we communicate with those particular students. We also know students that might have been admitted, but they either haven't received the communication in a while, or they haven't communicated with us. So we now know
Right.
those students maybe aren't as engaged as they used to be. How do we communicate with those students to make sure that we get them back
And
into
they're more engaged.
where they're truly interested? So the biggest thing we did, and I think that had really worked and gave us a lot of good data, is how we communicate with our admitted students. And that kind of give us a shine a light on, these things are working, these things are not working. These are the students that have a higher probability of coming to our campus. These students have a lower probability. How do we communicate with them so they can get into that next category? So that's probably one of the biggest things we've done, And I'll say the group, it was Enrollment Mail, that actually helped us with communicating with our admitted students.
Great. So that's good. So that means you're able to figure out what's working well and really having those metrics aligned back to that. And I'm going to talk about metrics in a second. Where are you still finding some challenges? What's kind of grinding your gears still?
I would say our biggest issue is just being in the state of Illinois. To be totally honest with you, we we uh, we have a strong recruiting base not only in Peoria, which is our local territory, but
Right.
in the Chicagoland area. So that's Chicago, the neighboring counties, the suburbs surrounding Chicago. And the issue is that everybody recruits Chicago. Besides, I think outside of New Jersey, Illinois is the number two exporter of students, and that's mostly in the Chicagoland area. And even with the enrollment cliff coming and having less number of students in Illinois and in Chicago, that's still a hotbed of students as far as just numbers are concerned. And that's where we get a nice amount of our students. And because the number of students are decreasing, even though Chicago is still a hotbed, we are struggling recruiting those Chicagoland students.
Right.
So because everybody's recruiting from the same pool. And the schools are doing well. Obviously, the Ivy Leagues and the land grant public institutions are doing well, but everybody else is now pulling from those students. And I'm curious now what's going to happen, and you want to go down this route or not. What's happening with international students?
Right.
Um, if that number, that student population is decreasing, then those big public schools are going to start trying to supplement that student number with in-state and out-of-state students, and that's going
Right.
to pull away from schools like Bradley. So
Right.
that's probably where the biggest concern, is right now.
That's interesting. I mean, I've been, as you know, I've been having a lot of these conversations with different institutions, and one individual I had a conversation with is actually not directly at an institution. He works with international students, and he works with connecting, universities with international students, and he talked about just the climate shift and how it is actually impacting the attractiveness of certain institutions to bring in that, foreign investment from international students. So it's interesting that you pinpoint that as well. Um, you mentioned metrics at one point, and I do want to ask you generally what data points are kind of helping you stay grounded, especially as you juggle, the short-term results and the long-term goals. How are you kind of measuring whether your new strategies are working?
Well, there's been a lot of conversations about the funnel, and
Right.
it's still a part of what we do, as far as prospective students, inquiries, applicants, admits, enroll. I think that's
Right.
still a metric that it can probably change over the last few years, but it's not going away anytime soon. I think one of the biggest things that I would say institutions are really thinking about is not just, I won't say cookie cutter, just trying to get as many inquiries as possible so they can get the number of applicants. Applicant number is important, but the type of inquiries are probably more important. Say this,
Right.
we need to purchase this number so we can have this in our pool, so those students can apply to our campus. That's not necessarily the case anymore, especially
Right.
with the advent of Common App and Coalition. Students can apply to as many different programs as they want to, and they might not necessarily complete or do the next step to complete those applications. So now we have applications in our pool. Those students really never had the wherewithal, not wherewithal, but the gumption to move
Right.
forward and finish the application because they're just applying to multiple schools. So students have to be a little more forward thinking about the type of inquiries that we are actually receiving. Are those students truly interested? And how are we using that data? How are other vendors using that data to make sure we're getting the right type of students in our inquiry pool? And we're just buying a bunch of numbers. That has definitely changed what I've seen over the last few years, that we have to be smarter and a little more strategic about how we add inquiries to our pool so we can get the right number of inquiries that make sure they translate into the applicants that we want, or the students that want to apply to our campus. So
Right.
that data actually makes sense, so we can get the admits and hopefully the enroll number that our institutions are looking for.
Right. So, and you're not once again, not the first person to talk about this, but this idea that the analysis of the metrics is really important in tying it back to the strategy because it's a longer process than just looking at the numbers. You need to understand what they mean and
Yes.
what that actually means in terms of your entire sales cycle. And for a lot of institutions, is a sales cycle compared to a small business, for example, a sales cycle is a longer process. You may have multiple touch points with them before you get them to the point of they're applying and they're here and what does their retention look like and so it's kind of a bigger picture thing, and I could see that as well in the way you talk about your metrics. um what are you thinking about over the next 6 to 12 months, like what, looking at your next year's cycle, what are the big changes or improvements you hope to kind of put in place, and that's either internally or even externally with prospective students or internally with your team.
Right now, internally, well, what was interesting when we first started, when I first got into this role in October, again, we were being really reactive, and
Right.
we are trying to make sure we're getting things we need done for this particular class.
Right.
And we kept having our to-do list. I'm like, in the summer, we're going to start doing these things. Well, guess what? It is now the summer, and that list is
Yes.
pretty long. And we had to figure this stuff out pretty much by, in some cases, July 1st, in other cases, August 1st. And
Right.
so, probably the biggest thing that we're doing now is coming up with a consistent communication plan. Again, we're working with our vendors to kind of come up with that. Um, and so that's where our biggest plan are happening now. That's where our meetings are right now. How do we
Right.
come up with a communication plan with our vendors so we're not only recruiting students for the 27 and 28 cycle starting early
Right.
on, but how are we getting in front of these soon to be seniors for this next 26 cycle? And by doing it this way, it really is going to help us be a lot more proactive when it comes to how we communicate with our students. So that's happening. Also, we're going to start working with our admissions counselors about the supplemental communication that we're working on.
Right.
Because we're a medium-sized institution in Illinois, our counselors are right in the heart of their territory. They know their territory in and out, so they have their own
Right.
communication plan to reach out to those students that they've met with, not only on visits but high school visits, college fairs, or any other, say, essay workshops or college search workshops that they're working in. So we want to make sure we're not duplicating efforts. So we'll have
Right.
our big picture communication plan, and then we're going to work with our staff to have a communication plan for their particular territory and make sure it kind of falls under, I will say, our guideline and our principles. So we're all saying a very similar message, a consistent message,
Yep.
but also is very
Totally.
specific and nuanced to their particular territory and their students. So all of that right now is happening during our summer time frame, and
Right.
you kept having these conversations throughout the year. It was like the summer will do all this, and now it's the summer. It is here, and I thought my calendar was going to be free, but I guess there's no such thing as a summer anymore in higher education.
There's no such
So
thing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, I said this to my staff. If I'm doing my job right, the busy time is going to be the summer for me, and then we're going to
Right.
make sure you have everything you need. So when the travel starts, you know exactly what the game plan is for the next school year.
Right. And so that's the kind of thing that I do all the time, that long-term communications planning and then the segmented pieces of how you can carry piece of that, objective over here and what the rollout would be over there and over here. So I completely understand what you're saying. That's exactly what it is that I do. I think about um I think about what some of your specific goals are, more like I wonder what some of your specific goals are. So it sounds to me like you're doing a lot of outreach, a lot of almost personalized, customized outreach to the different segments that you have within your ecosystem. Is that right? Is that what you would say like your tailored goals are?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the communication is a huge part of that. I mean, we have our enrollment goals. I think school like ours, we want more students,
Yeah.
and I guess probably one of the biggest things that we're trying to have a mindset change is that
Okay.
as an institution, we need to stop thinking about just first year students. And I think
Right.
every institution I mean, everybody's trying to get the big number of first year students. We
Right.
got to get to a point where not only we think about first year students, we're thinking about transfer students, and like I said earlier about graduate being this is the
Right.
first time we really incorporated graduate recruitment in enrollment management or admissions within Bradley, all that needs to play, I want to say equal part, but it needs to be, people should be talking about all three of those different instances rather than just worried about first year. So yeah,
Right.
first year, transfer, graduate, the international part plays into that. We do have an online, a robust online program, not only for transfer students, but for graduate students as well. All that plays a role, and it should be the forefront of everything that we do as far as how we recruit students in those different instances.
That's really interesting. I think it's first of all smart that you identify that there is an opportunity that not only looking at the first time undergraduate students coming in, really realizing that there is more of a market for transfer students, graduate students, international students coming in, and how you market or communicate with them so that they understand the value of your particular institution and your brand. I've been having a lot of conversations about the value of higher ed as a whole generally. I wonder if any of that comes into play with you and kind of what you're doing in terms of enrollment, in terms of storytelling about Bradley, in terms of positioning. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I know we've been having conversations about the value of higher ed and
Right,
do students truly understand that value, or they still carry it in the same esteem as
right,
they used to. And I guess first thing when I think about me, I feel like I'm an educator and an advocate. I want you to come to my institution. I hope you feel like you're a good fit for this institution. But I want students to think about what the next step is after, say, high school or after
right,
going to a community college. If it's a trade school, if it's a community college, you get an applied science degree, or if it's going to a point where you're going to graduate and want to go for a bachelor's degree.
right,
I would love to have that conversation for students to think about that next step because college is not for everyone, but also
right.
depends on what that particular student wants.
One.
So I hope when I'm talking to students, or I hope when I'm in my mindset and trying to map out strategically what we want to do as an institution, that's at the forefront. What are we putting in front of students to make sure this is the best fit for them? And being honest with those students about, okay, well, this is what you want. We're probably not the best fit. Have you thought
Right.
about other instances, other places? I was at an essay workshop earlier this week, and I was with four other institutions, and we were having a conversation that, like, yes, we compete with each other, but we're also colleagues and friends.
Right.
So if
Right.
we're talking about our institutions and you're not the right fit, I can lead you or point you to someone else, another institution that might be the right fit. In the
Right.
end, a lot of these things that we do are trying to help students figure out what that next step will be. And that's where I feel like my role as an advocate, as an educator, is the way to get those students hopefully towards the next step. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I kind of
You
went on
did.
this. Okay.
No, I think you no, I think you did. I think you did answer the question. And I think you touched on something that I've been having more conversations with other people about as well, is this idea of almost partnership in a partnership across the sector, right? There's this acknowledgement that it's not we're not rivals in the same sense as I think it used to be. It's there's an acknowledgement in terms of we understand the value of higher ed and we need to figure out how we can best share one the value of of our individual institutions, but two, really understanding the kind of the morality piece of it, that you want students to come there and have a good experience and have the best experience for them so they could get on with their lives and find the
Right.
best careers and whatever the case may be. And shifting that narrative in itself, I think and doing that collectively in partnership with your other neighboring institutions is an opportunity in itself to really boost your own institution's brand and your own institution's value. So I think you answered the question because you touched, I think you touched on that piece of it. um I always ask this question about the magic wand, and that's, if I gave you the magic wand and you could instantly snap your fingers, wave it, whatever, and, fix one major challenge that you're having right now in your institution, what would you change first and why?
That's a good question. That's
It
a good
is.
question. I would. I'm thinking about this for my institution, but probably a lot of others that might fall into this category. If I made wave a magic wand, I would make the financial decision not a huge part of, of the next step as far as going to college.
Right.
Because I talk to a lot of students where this is the right fit for them. But unfortunately, that cost is a little bit high, so
Yeah, they
they're
can.
not able to make the decision. I have a niece who is thinking about college right now, and we were having conversations. And one institution she talked about was glowing, and she loved every bit of it. And then I asked, like, so where do you think we want to go? And she was going to choose the local college because of the
Right.
price tag. And I said, well, tell me why
Uh,
you're interested in that particular local college. And you could tell just by body language, her shoulders slumped, got her head to the
yeah.
side. She wasn't really smiling. It was like that part right there. How can we change the cost of our institution so that's not a huge factor? So
Right.
students can truly make a decision. I want to come here because this is the right fit for me,
Right.
or this is an academic fit, this is the social fit, the financial fit. Hopefully, it's going to be there, but it's like much lower. How can we find a way to make things more affordable so that is not the deciding factor of the institution? And I hope, in doing that, I hope students really make a decision what's best for them, what's best for their pockets or their parents' pockets. They make a decision that's going to be right for them.
That's a good answer. It's a broad answer. It's one of those like ideal answers, like I wish we could change the world answers, and not in a bad way, definitely in a good, definitely in a good way. I think about, bringing it a little bit closer to home for you though. Is there something that you could, if I could give you that magic wand and you could change it and it could impact your day to day, or it could impact, and maybe it is that, maybe it's a messaging thing. Maybe it's a way that you market your institution to students so that they're able to find more connections to, financial aid, or they're able to, find their way around the finance piece and still boost, your maybe even your institution up as like the choice for them.
Well, I think it. I mean, we were talking a lot about this. I feel like it comes back to communication. How do
Right.
we? How can we as an institution communicate? I want to say if it's better or clear to
Right.
students. And you touched on a
Right.
little bit like we're trying to lean more into storytelling rather
Yeah.
than basing facts and giving students a bunch of bullet points. What's going to connect with that student? And
Connection.
I was at a previous institution. We used to do presentations, and they were anywhere between 40 minutes to an hour long, and we were
Right.
just regurgitating information. And one of the things that made us change, actually, two things. One was after the pandemic, and we were like everybody's losing staff, so we had to figure out how are
Right.
we going to maintain this admissions office, and we leaned into our students. And one reason we leaned into our students was because the surveys were telling us they really enjoyed visiting and talking to students.
Right.
So we shortened our presentation. We taught our, I guess, seniors and interns the presentation were based on their stories. We had
Right.
we had guidelines for them, but it was based on their information, their stories.
Right.
And we pretty much the visit was about visiting students, seeing current students, and at the
Right.
same time seeing the campus as a whole. And that kind of changed the
The narrative.
it changed the visit and changed the mindset. And
Right.
now, as far as how we communicate with students, how do we get or prospective students, how do we get them in front of our students? They're our greatest storyteller. They're our best selling point,
Right.
and a lot of that's with storytelling. If it's videos, if it's just in a short blurb in an email, our students have done this with a picture or something like that. How do we get them? How do we get or recruiting or prospective students to see our current students in
Right.
a more robust, brighter light, and also a short amount of time. If we do anything longer than a minute or two, they're not going to look at
Yeah.
it. Or
Yeah. Of
we
course.
we give them past a paragraph or two, they're not going to read the email. So it
Yes.
has to be quick, concise, and informative.
I think that's a really great note, and a note that I'm seeing once again across the board is this idea that, you're trying to reach out to students. Students need to see themselves in your institution. It can't be the institutional leaders. Students need to see themselves there, and the best way to do that is by engaging with other students who are there. So I think that's a powerful, powerful storytelling tool. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you want to tell me that I didn't ask you about, or that you're like, I really wanted to share this thing before we close?
Uh, I really enjoy what I do. Um, I've been doing this for a long time, and I got to a point where I felt like I need to stop being in front of the students. I felt like I was getting old,
Right.
but at the same time, like I think I talked about the essay workshop. I really enjoyed doing that. It kind of reinvigorated me, just talking about the
Right.
college search process, answering questions, asking questions of students, so I can hear like what they're thinking. Um, Now I'm at a place where I can do my best to try to remove barriers to
Right.
access for institutions or for my institution. But in the end, it all comes down to working with students, with families, helping them find their path. And
Right.
I, when I first got into this, I heard I was going to be doing this either 3 or 30 years. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's still the same. People think about it the same way getting into this field, but I know I'm a 30-year person. I'm doing this
Right.
for as long as I possibly can.
That's so refreshing and so good to hear. I love to hear things like that. People who are passionate about what it is that they do. Um, I have to say a big thank you. Thanks so much for sharing your time, your experience, your perspective with me today. It's been a really thoughtful and generous conversation. To anybody who listens or watches this, I hope this episode sparked ideas, affirmed your own experiences, or helped you see, any one of your challenges in a new light. If you're a leader in higher ed, you can be in communications or marketing or advancement or enrollment, whatever, and you want to contribute to this evolving conversation, I would love to hear from you because ideally we're going to co-create a really great roadmap for the future of our field. So let's get to work. Thanks so much again, Brian.
Thank you. I really appreciate the conversation. It was awesome.